Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The acid green bog bubbled 3 feet below Matthew's head, releasing sulfurous burps that made his eyes water. Blood rushed to his temples as he hung upside down from the training bar, arms crossed over his chest, counting each second like a prayer for death. "Grandpa, I'm gonna puke." Admiral Thomas Stormbreaker sipped his coffee from a thermos, checking his wrist chronometer with the casual interest of a man timing eggs. The morning heat of Scarven 7 already pressed down like a wet blanket, making the boy's training uniform stick to his skinny frame. "Warriors don't puke, boy. 2 minutes and 43 seconds left." "But my head's gonna explode." Then it was weak to begin with. The old man settled onto a rusted cargo container, his pristine white uniform somehow immune to the planet's perpetual grime. "Your father hung for 10 minutes at your age, over real lava." Matthew knew better than to argue that real lava would have killed anyone from the heat alone. Grandpa's stories grew with each telling, like the universe itself, constantly expanding and increasingly difficult to believe. A bog beetle the size of a dinner plate crawled up the training bar toward Matthew's bound ankles. Its mandibles clicked thoughtfully, tasting the air around his sweaty socks. "There's a bug. Good. Builds character." The beetle's antenna tickled through the fabric. Matthew thrashed, making his stomach content slosh dangerously. "Stay still," Thomas commanded. "In real combat, showing fear gets you killed faster than—" Matthew vomited spectacularly. The bog below hissed and bubbled with new enthusiasm, while the beetle scuttled away in disgust. Thomas stood, brushing imaginary dust from his uniform. "Pathetic. We'll start over after breakfast." He cut the rope. Matthew hit the bog bank hard, rolling away from the acidic edge just as his grandfather had taught him, probably the only reason the old bastard dropped him there. Covered in mud and shame, the boy pushed himself up on shaking arms. "Breakfast is canceled," Thomas announced, already walking toward their temporary quarters. "Weakness doesn't eat." The moment his grandfather disappeared around a stack of shipping containers, Matthew ran. He knew every blind spot in the old man's surveillance network by now. 3 months on this cesspool of a trading planet had taught him that much. The security cameras followed predictable patterns, and the Admiral's military discipline meant precisely scheduled bathroom breaks. Matthew had 7 minutes of freedom. He vaulted over a chain-link fence, scrambled through a drainage pipe that reeked of alien waste, and emerged in the lower markets where even Thomas Stormbreaker wouldn't follow in his precious white uniform. The crowds here moved like a living thing. Graki traders with their mantis-like bodies clicking over prices, blue-skinned Etherians floating past in environment suits, humans haggling over black market tech. The air tasted of burnt metal and fried protein, tinged with the sweet rot of overripe fruit from 3 different worlds. Matthew swiped a meat stick from a distracted vendor's cart, devouring it as he walked. His stomach, empty except for acid and rage, welcomed the greasy sustenance. That's when he heard the screams. Not the ordinary shouting of the markets. He'd learned to filter that out. This was different, younger, frightened. He followed the sound down an alley between 2 decomposing buildings, where fungus grew in patterns that hurt to look at directly. 3 Graki had cornered something small against a waste compactor. "Valurian girl flesh brings good price," one clicked in broken common, its 4 arms weaving excited patterns. "Collectors pay much for last of dead empire." The small figure pressed harder against the wall, hidden beneath a tattered cloak. "Share 3 ways," another Graki agreed, reaching with a serrated claw, "or sell whole, buyers like unbroken." Matthew's hand found a length of pipe before his brain fully processed the decision. 10 years old, 40 kilos soaking wet, against 3 adult Graki who stood 7 feet tall each. Grandpa would call this stupid. Matthew called it Tuesday. He brought the pipe down hard on the first Gracky's knee joint, the weak spot Grandpa had drilled into him during their xenobiology lessons. The creature's leg buckled with a sound like breaking celery. As it toppled, Matthew grabbed a chunk of broken concrete and pitched it straight into the second trader's compound eyes. The third, Gracky, lunged. Matthew dropped and rolled between its legs, came up behind it, and delivered a kick to what Grandpa had delicately called the universal weak point. Even mantis aliens had sensitive spots, apparently. Crazy human pup. The one with concrete in its eyes stumbled away, greenish blood leaking from one socket. Not worth, not worth. They fled, the injured one dragging its broken leg, leaving smears of ichor on the alley floor. Matthew stood panting, pipe still raised, adrenaline making his whole body sing. The cloaked figure hadn't moved. "Hey," he said, trying to sound like the heroes in his hidden comic collection. "You okay?" The hood lifted. Matthew forgot how breathing worked. Purple skin like twilight sky. Silver hair that caught even the dim alley light and threw it back in prismatic sparkles. Eyes the color of Terran amethysts. He knew because Grandpa had shown him pictures during their geology lessons, though he'd called it knowing your minerals for strategic purposes. But mostly, she looked scared. You beat them up," she whispered. "Like Captain Cosmos. Bam! Pow!" Matthew's chest puffed out before he could stop it. "That was nothing. Grandpa makes me fight training robots, underwater, with my eyes closed." "Really?" "Well, one eye closed." He rubbed his neck, suddenly aware he was covered in bog mud and vomit splatter. "I'm Matthew, but everyone calls me Matt, except Grandpa. He calls me Disappointment." She giggled, actually giggled, and Matthew decided it was the best sound on any planet. "I'm Tyrus. Where are your parents? This place isn't safe for kids." Her smile faded. "Don't have any, not anymore." Matthew knew that tone. It was the same one he used when people asked about his mom and dad, before Grandpa usually interrupted with a lecture about dwelling on the past. "Come on," he said, offering his muddy hand. "I know somewhere better." She took it without hesitation. Over the next 5 days, Matthew became a master of escape. He memorized Grandpa's routines down to the minute, learned which training exercises left the old man needing longer bathroom breaks. The high-gravity conditioning required at least 10 minutes of recovery, and discovered that certain frequencies of "Yes, sir," and "I understand, Admiral," could lull Thomas into believing his grandson was properly subdued. Every free moment, he ran to find Tyrus. She showed him the abandoned docking bay where she'd built a shelter from cargo foam and thermal blankets. "Borrowed from supply ships," she said with a grin. The acoustics were perfect for their games. "I'm captain of the Star Destroyer Revenge," Matthew announced, standing atop a defunct loading mech. "Fear my wrath, space pirates." "Why do you get the destroyer?" Tyrus scrambled up beside him. "I want a ship, too." "Fine, you can be my first officer." "No, I want my own ship. The Star Princess." "That's a stupid name for a battleship." "It's not a battleship, dummy. It's a science vessel with secret weapons." She pushed him playfully. "And it's faster than yours." "Nothing's faster than the Revenge." "Want to bet?" They raced through the docking bay, leaping over dead equipment and sliding under low-hanging cables, their laughter echoing off metal walls. Matthew let her win, though he'd never admit it. On the third day, she brought him to her special place. Hidden behind a collapsed warehouse, past a maze of discarded shipping containers, was a patch of actual Earth. Not the synthetic growing medium of hydroponic farms or the carefully managed soil of terraformed worlds, but real chaotic dirt where things grew wild. Purple flowers with golden centers pushed through cracks in the concrete. They looked wrong somehow, like nature's rebellion against the industrial decay. "Mom taught me about these," Tyrus said, plucking the stems with practiced fingers. They're from Valuria originally. Someone must have dropped seeds years ago. She began weaving them together, her small hands impossibly quick and sure. She said even in the darkest places, beauty finds a way. Flowers are stupid, Matthew said automatically, though he watched her fingers with fascination. Grandpa says nature makes you soft. Only discipline and steel matter. Your grandpa's an idiot. Hey, he's an admiral. He's won like 100 battles. Still an idiot if he can't see beauty. She finished the crown and placed it on his muddy head. There, now you're King Matthew. I look dumb. You look perfect. She started another crown for herself. Promise me something. What? Promise you won't become like him, all hard and mean and empty. Matthew touched the flowers on his head. They felt impossibly delicate, like they might crumble if he breathed wrong. I'm going to be a soldier, like my dad was. You can be a soldier and still like flowers. Cannot. Can too. She finished her crown and wore it like it was made of diamonds. My mom was a soldier. She taught me to fight and to make flower crowns. She said both were important. What happened to her? Tyrus pulled her knees to her chest. The bad people came. She told me to run, so I ran. Matthew didn't ask about the bad people. Even at 10, he knew that tone, the one that meant the story hurt too much to tell. Want to see something cool? He asked instead. From his pocket, he pulled out his prized possession, a curved tooth the length of his thumb, yellowed with age. Whoa, is that from a real dragon? Grandpa says it's just a fossil from some extinct animal. But look. He held it up to the light. See those marks? They could be from dragon fire. Or they could be from a plasma torch, she said practically. You're no fun. I'm lots of fun, just not stupid. But she smiled as she said it. On the 7th day, his last day, Matthew knew he had to say goodbye. He'd stolen food before, little things Grandpa wouldn't miss from their supplies. But this time, he took everything he could carry. Protein bars, water purification tablets, a medical kit, and most importantly, the credit chips he'd been saving for 3 years. 200 credits. Enough to buy passage off-world if you knew the right people. Enough for the plasma sword he'd dreamed about since seeing one in a weapon shop on Terra Prime. Enough to save someone. He found Tyrus in their docking bay, sitting on her foam mattress, weaving another flower crown. Hey, look what I brought! He dumped the supplies at her feet like offerings to a queen. Her eyes widened. Matt, this is too much. No, it's not. Look. He spread out the credit chips. This can get you a room at the transit station. The clean one, not the scary one with the things in the walls. Get some real food. Find work, maybe. There's always jobs for smart kids who can... Matt. Her voice was small. I can't take your money. Yes, you can. You have to. He grabbed her shoulders, suddenly desperate to make her understand. I'm leaving tomorrow. Grandpa's mission here is done, and we're going back to the military academy on Terra Prime, and I can't... His voice cracked, stupid baby tears threatening. I'll come back, he said fiercely. Soon as I'm old enough to tell Grandpa to stuff his orders, I'll find you and we'll go on real adventures. I'll have my own ship by then, a fast one. Not faster than mine, though, she said, but tears ran down her purple cheeks. Maybe we could share one. Be co-captains. That's not a thing. We'll make it a thing. He pressed the credits into her hands. Take it, please. Buy food, stay safe, and wait for me. She looked at the chips, then at him. Don't promise things you can't do. I always keep my promises. Always. It's the Stormbreaker way. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. His face burned hotter than the acid bog. Then she pulled something from around her neck, a leather cord holding the dragon tooth he'd given her days ago. Wear this, she said, tying it around his neck. So you remember. I won't forget. You will. You'll go back to your fancy school and meet normal human girls and forget the weird purple girl from the gross trading planet. Never. He pulled his lucky crystal from his pocket, a clear quartz he'd found on his first mission with Grandpa, the one thing the old man hadn't been able to take away. You keep this, for luck. She clutched it like a lifeline. They stood there, two children on the edge of something neither understood, the weight of leaving, of class and race and the vast universe between them, pressing down like gravity. That dragon tooth? She said suddenly. I think it really is from a dragon. Really? Really. And someday you'll slay another dragon and bring me its whole head. Dragons don't exist. They do if we say they do. Matthew hugged her then, quick and fierce, before either could think too much about it. See you soon, Tyrus. See you soon, Matthew Stormbreaker. He ran before she could see him cry. Heroes didn't cry, Grandpa said. But maybe, Matthew thought as he fingered the tooth around his neck, Grandpa was wrong about a lot of things. Tomorrow he'd return to training, to hanging upside down and fighting robots and learning 17 ways to kill with a dinner fork. But tonight, he was just a boy who'd saved a girl, made a friend, and learned that flowers could grow anywhere, even in the darkest places. He didn't know that the purple girl was a princess, didn't know that his credits would buy her more than food, they'd buy her a future, didn't know that the dragon tooth around his neck would one day identify him to an empress. All he knew was that for 7 days, he'd been more than Thomas Stormbreaker's disappointing grandson. He'd been Matt, and Matt kept his promises. Even if it took 20 years, 20 years have flown by so quickly. The plasma blade kissed Matthew's throat, close enough that he could smell his own neck hair singeing. Last words, human? The executioner growled. Admiral Matthew Stormbreaker, decorated hero of the Battle of New Terra, winner of the Crimson Star, tested the energy shackles binding his wrists behind his back. They held firm, as expected. The executioner's breath reeked of fermented tuber root, breakfast of champions on Valuria, apparently. Around him, 10,000 purple-skinned Valurians packed the Grand Plaza, their collective body heat making the afternoon sun feel like a sauna. Someone had brought snacks. He could smell fried insects and that peculiar sweet bread Valurians loved. Nothing like a good execution to work up an appetite. Actually, yes, Matthew said, projecting his voice like Grandpa had taught him, from the diaphragm, not the throat. First off, lovely planet you've got here. Really. The architecture? Magnificent. Those spiral towers that twist into the clouds? Genius. Much better than the brutal blocks we build on Terra Prime. The executioner pressed the blade closer, making Matthew's skin sizzle. Silence! Also, Matthew continued, because when facing death, why not go all in? Someone please tell your empress that her garden is spectacular. Those purple and gold flowers. A friend of mine used to love those, said they could grow anywhere, even in the darkest places. The crowd murmured, some shocked, others confused. Insulting their empress's garden? Even for a human, that was bold. Enough! The voice cracked like thunder across the plaza. The crowd didn't just part, they practically dove aside, pressing against each other in their haste to clear a path. Bodies stumbled. Children were lifted onto shoulders. 10,000 people moved as one terrified mass. She walked like a weapon, each step calculated, purposeful. Her silver armor caught sunlight and threw it back as liquid mercury. The crowd dropped to their knees in waves, first those nearest, then rippling outward like dominoes falling. Matthew kept his eyes up, drinking in details 20 years of dreams hadn't quite gotten right. The purple skin had deepened to the color of twilight just before full dark. Her silver hair, once wild and free, now flowed in an intricate weave that must have taken hours to achieve. The armor hugged curves that definitely hadn't existed when she was 9, But it was her eyes that stopped his heart. Amethyst, yes, but frozen now, hard as the gems they resembled. He searched for something, anything familiar. Then he saw it, there, at her throat, barely visible beneath the armor's collar, a silver chain catching the light, and hanging from it, almost hidden, a clear crystal, his lucky crystal, the one he'd pressed into her small hands 20 years ago. "Empress Tyrus," the crowd chanted. "Long may she reign." She stopped 3 feet away and began circling him slowly. Matthew felt like prey, a mouse being evaluated by a particularly elegant cat. "So," she said, her voice carrying that particular royal disdain that took years to perfect, "the great Admiral Stormbreaker, caught stealing from my private archives." "Allegedly," Matthew corrected, shifting his weight to ease the strain on his shoulders. One perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose. She took another measured step. "You were found in my vault." "I was lost." He managed a shrug despite the shackles. "Your palace is very confusing." She continued her circle, armor clicking softly, "with classified documents in your hands." "I thought they were tourist brochures," he offered with practiced innocence. "And my personal recipe for cloud pudding?" Her voice held the faintest hint of amusement. Matthew grinned. "Okay, that one's on me. But in my defense, it smelled amazing and the kitchen staff refused to share." A muscle twitched in her jaw. Almost a smile. Almost. "You know the penalty for espionage against the Valurian Empire?" She completed her circle, stopping directly in front of him. "Death by plasma blade, preceded by a lengthy speech about imperial justice." "Preceded by torture," she corrected, tilting her head slightly. "Then the speech, then the blade." "Seems redundant. The speech alone would kill most people." This time, definitely almost a smile. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, to something warmer. She turned to face the crowd. "Execute him." The crowd cheered. The executioner raised his blade, its hum rising to a deadly whine. "Wait." Tyrus held up one hand. The plaza fell silent instantly, 10,000 voices cutting off mid-cheer. "Death is too simple for this one." She paused, letting anticipation build. "Too quick." She stepped closer to Matthew, close enough that he could smell something floral in her hair, purple and gold flowers, he realized. Close enough to see the faint scar on her left cheek he didn't remember from childhood. "I have a better fate for the famous Admiral Stormbreaker," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent plaza. "He'll become my personal prisoner, my pet human. Let everyone see how the mighty hero of Terra Prime kneels at my feet." The crowd ate it up, roaring approval. Public humiliation beat public execution any day. More entertainment value, and it lasted longer. "Take him to my quarters," she commanded the guards, who stepped forward immediately. "Chain him like the dog he is." As they hauled him to his feet, rough hands under his arms, Matthew caught her eye. For just a second, the ice cracked. Something flickered there, recognition, maybe even warmth. Then it reformed, harder than before, and she turned away with imperial dismissal. The imperial quarters sprawled across the palace's entire upper floor, a maze of rooms that probably required a map to navigate. The guards chained Matthew to a post in what appeared to be a sitting room, though sitting didn't do justice to the furniture that looked carved from single pieces of pale wood. "The Empress will deal with you when she's ready," one guard sneered, giving the chains an extra tug that bit into Matthew's wrists. They left him alone. Matthew counted to 100 after the door closed, listened for footsteps. Nothing. Time for Grandpa's favorite party trick. He dislocated his thumb. It hurt like hell, same as it had the first 50 times Grandpa made him practice. But pain was just information, and information could be ignored. He slipped one hand free, reset his thumb with a quiet pop, then went to work on the locks. "You know," a voice said behind him, Those chains cost more than a starship. Matthew spun so fast he nearly dislocated his shoulder. Tyra stood in a doorway he hadn't even noticed, having traded her armor for a simple dress that somehow made her look more dangerous, not less. "I'll buy you new ones," he managed. She touched a wall panel. A soft hum filled the room, the familiar vibration of a privacy field engaging. "Now we can speak freely." She studied him for a long moment, taking a step closer. "Matt? Is it really you?" "Hello, flower girl?" The ice shattered completely. She crossed the room in 3 strides and punched him in the shoulder, hard. "Ow! What was that for?" 20 years. Her voice cracked. 20 years without a word. "I was busy." He rubbed his shoulder. "Busy?" She hit him again, this time in the other shoulder. "Too busy to send one message. One, 'Hey, I'm alive, how are you?'" Matthew backed up a step. "You disappeared. I came back to Scarven 7 when I turned 18, spent 3 months searching. Nobody knew about a purple girl named Tyrus." "Because I'd already taken back my throne by then, you idiot." She advanced on him, fists clenched. "How was I supposed to know you were a secret princess?" He threw his hands up in defense. "You said you were an orphan." She stopped, breathing hard. "I was. My aunt orphaned me quite effectively when she murdered my parents and banished me." They stood glaring at each other, chests heaving. Then Matthew noticed the tears rolling down her purple cheeks. "Hey," he said softly, reaching toward her. "Don't—" She grabbed his shirt and kissed him. Not the innocent peck on the cheek from childhood. This was different. This was 20 years of wondering compressed into one moment. 20 years of anger and longing. She kissed him like she was drowning and he was air. Then she pulled back and slapped him. "Ow!" Matthew touched his stinging cheek. "Mixed signals much?" "That's for the pudding theft." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, rebuilding her composure brick by brick. She took a breath, then another. "Also, you're supposed to be dead." "About that." Matthew rubbed his cheek, which was definitely going to bruise. "Grandpa's grand plan. Stage my death, infiltrate the traitor syndicate, gather intelligence, classic Stormbreaker subterfuge." "And I ruined it by saving you," she said, understanding dawning. "Completely. He's going to be furious. Might actually kill me himself this time." She walked to the window, putting distance between them. "Why didn't you signal me? Let me know the plan." Matthew followed but kept a safe distance from slapping range. "Because I didn't know you were you. You're in all the intelligence briefings as the Ice Empress. Cold, ruthless, possibly psychotic. There's a whole section about your collection of human skulls." She turned, one eyebrow raised. "I don't collect skulls. That's gross." The intelligence was very specific. "One skull." She held up a finger. "One. My aunt's former advisor, and it's a paperweight now, so it's practical." Matthew stared at her for a long beat. "That's actually more disturbing." "He betrayed my parents." The ice crept back into her voice, cold and sharp. "He got what he deserved." This wasn't the girl who made flower crowns. This was someone forged in fire and cooled in blood. But then again, Matthew wasn't the boy who puked in bog water anymore either. "So what now?" he asked, breaking the tension. "Can't execute me, can't free me, bit of a pickle." She turned back to the window, gazing at the city below. "Now? Now you play the broken prisoner. I parade you around like a trophy, and we figure out why the traitor syndicate really wanted you dead." "You know about the syndicate?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I know they're funding my cousin Kale's little rebellion. I know they want me dead. And I know they were very interested in making sure you never reached Valuria." She turned back to face him. "What did you really steal, Matt? Would you believe the pudding recipe?" She gave him a look that could freeze plasma. "Try again," she said flatly. Matthew sighed. "Shipping manifests, boring stuff, grain deliveries, medical supplies, weapon shipments to a dozen different planets. Including weapons here, she interrupted, her eyes narrowing. To my cousin. Yes. How long? 6 months, minimum, maybe longer. He paused, meeting her gaze. Heavy ordnance, too, the kind that cracks bunkers. Or palaces, she said quietly. Or palaces, he agreed. She crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of something amber. Drink? Trying to get me drunk so I'll reveal human military secrets? Trying to get us both drunk so I can pretend this is simple. She poured 2 glasses, the liquid catching the light. Remember when our biggest problem was hiding from your grandfather? Now I'm hiding from half the galaxy. He accepted the glass and sniffed. It smelled like burnt flowers and bad decisions. What is this? Valyrian courage. She raised her glass. That's not a metaphor, it's literally called that. They drank. It tasted worse than it smelled, but hit his stomach like liquid warmth. So, he said, setting down his empty glass, about this pet prisoner thing. Oh, you're going to hate it. For the first time, she actually smiled. The real smile he remembered from childhood. I'm going to make you wear a collar. Absolutely not. Her smile widened. With a little bell. Tyrus. And you'll have to call me mistress in public, she added, clearly enjoying his horror. I'd rather die. That can still be arranged. But she was laughing now, the sound bright and familiar, and suddenly she looked 20 years younger. The laugh faded into something softer. God, Matt, how did this happen? How did we become this? You became an empress. I became a weapon. He set down his glass with a soft clink. Your cousin, Kale. Tell me about him. The laughter died completely. Ambitious, cruel. She refilled their glasses, the bottle clinking against crystal. Thinks the throne should have been his because he has the pure blood, and I'm tainted by my mother's common genetics. Your mother was common? A soldier. Dad fell in love with her during a border skirmish. She took another sip. Huge scandal. Aunt never forgave him for marrying beneath his station. And now the son wants what he thinks is his, Matthew said, understanding the dynamics, with the syndicate's help. She stared into her glass. They're planning something. Soon. I can feel it. How do you know? She looked up, meeting his eyes. Because 3 of my food tasters have died this month. Someone's testing poisons. Matthew's blood chilled. Tyrus, I'm careful, she cut him off. But they're getting desperate, and desperate people. The reception hall glittered with the kind of wealth that made Matthew's military salary look like pocket change. Valyrian nobles in flowing robes that cost more than fighters, drinking wine that could fund a small colony, gossiping about scandals that would bore paint off walls. Matthew stood 3 steps behind Tyrus's throne, wearing the single most humiliating outfit he'd ever encountered, and he'd once infiltrated a pleasure cruise dressed as a cabana boy. The collar was real metal, etched with Valyrian symbols that probably said, property of the Empress. The rest was essentially leather straps and silk pants that left very little to anyone's imagination. He looked like he'd lost a fight with a bondage catalog. Stop fidgeting, Tyrus murmured without turning around. This outfit is fidgeting all by itself, Matthew muttered back. Lord Kale, approach, she called out suddenly, cutting him off. Matthew's muscles tensed. A man stepped from the crowd with predatory grace. Kale had the family resemblance, purple skin, silver hair. But where Tyrus wore her beauty like armor, Kale's looks were a weapon. Sharp cheekbones, cruel mouth, eyes like poisoned honey. Beloved cousin, Kale said, his bow exactly 1 millimeter less than protocol demanded. I see you're enjoying your new pet. He's amusing, Tyrus replied, her voice carrying practiced boredom. Humans break so easily. I heard this one was supposed to be special. Kale circled closer. The great Admiral Stormbreaker. Look at him now. She gestured dismissively without looking, kneeling at my feet like the dog he is. Matthew kept his expression blank, but inside he catalogued everything. A butter knife on the nearest table, 20 feet. A decorative sword on the wall, might hold an edge. The heel of Lady Whatever's shoe, currently 3 feet to his left. May I? Cale asked, stepping even closer. Tyrus waved permission. Cale studied Matthew like a specimen, walking slowly around him. Such a waste of good muscle. In the old days, we'd have made him fight for our entertainment. The old days are dead, Tyrus said, her voice cooling by degrees. Are they? Cale smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Some of us remember when Valuria was feared, not just tolerated. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Conversations nearby stuttered to silence. Choose your next words carefully, cousin, Tyrus warned softly. I simply mean, Cale continued, his smile widening, that your mother would be proud. She always did prefer mercy to strength. Matthew saw it. Tyrus's hand twitched toward where a weapon would be. My mother, she said, each word precise as a blade, killed 30 enemy soldiers with a broken blade in her bare hands. Would you like me to demonstrate her technique? The tension stretched taut. Your Majesty! A servant burst through the main doors, gasping for breath. There's been an incident in the kitchens. Tyrus rose from her throne. What kind of incident? Chef Morvac is dead, Your Majesty. The servant gulped air. Poison. He was preparing your evening meal. In the heartbeat of shock that followed, guards starting to move, nobles gasping, Cale's lips curling in what might have been a smirk, Matthew caught Tyrus's eye. She gave the tiniest nod. Time to stop playing. Matthew moved. First, the collar. He'd been weakening the clasp for hours with tiny movements. It snapped like cheap plastic. Second, the nearest guard. The decorative chains from his costume became a garrote, wrapping around the man's throat. Matthew pulled tight. The guard dropped, unconscious in 3 seconds. Assassins! Lady Whatever screamed. 3 figures in servants' clothing pulled weapons from beneath their robes. Matthew grabbed the butter knife from the table and threw it in one smooth motion. 20 feet. Perfect rotation. It took the first assassin in the eye. Not fatal, but the man dropped his weapon, screaming. Tyrus had her own problems. 2 attackers rushed her from opposite sides. She grabbed the decorative sword from the wall. Matthew had been right. It did hold an edge, and opened the first attacker from navel to neck in one fluid motion. Blood sprayed across white marble. The second attacker hesitated just for a heartbeat. Too long. Tyrus pivoted on her heel and took his head off with a horizontal sweep. Behind you! Matthew shouted. She dropped instantly, rolling left as a plasma bolt seared the air where her head had been. Matthew was already moving. He tackled the shooter, drove an elbow into his solar plexus, grabbed the plasma weapon as the man doubled over, and put a hole through his chest. The room exploded into chaos. Nobles screaming and pushing toward exits. Guards finally responding but not knowing who to target. And in the confusion... Cale's gone, Tyrus called out. The garden, Matthew replied. They'll try to escape through... An explosion shook the palace, closer than the others. The floor tilted suddenly. Matthew lunged for Tyrus, pulling her against a support column just as the ceiling began raining marble chunks. We need to go, he shouted over the noise. My people, she started. Will die if you die. Move. They ran together, hand in hand, through corridors rapidly filling with smoke. Behind them, the reception hall collapsed with a sound like the world ending. The roof garden sprawled across 3 terraces, a miracle of engineering that brought real earth and growing things to a palace in the sky. Purple and gold flowers grew everywhere, their sweet scent mixing with smoke from the fires below. They stood for a moment, catching their breath. It's beautiful. Matthew said between gasps. "I grew it for you." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She immediately tried to cover. "I mean, I grew them because—" "I know what you meant," he said gently. They stood among the flowers, the palace burning beneath them, assassins probably seconds away, and Matthew couldn't stop staring at her. Covered in blood, mostly not hers, dress torn, hair wild from its elaborate style, she looked like war itself. "You kept the crystal," he observed, noticing the glint at her throat. Her hand went to touch it reflexively. "And you kept the tooth," she said. He pulled the leather cord from beneath the remains of his ridiculous outfit. The dragon's tooth hung there, worn smooth by 20 years of wearing. 20 years, she said softly. 20 years, he agreed. A moment of silence, then she spoke again. "I used your money to hire mercenaries, took back my throne, built an empire. I learned to kill with everything from a spoon to a starship," he replied. "Became Grandpa's perfect weapon." "Are we who we wanted to be?" she asked. Matthew considered. "I don't know. Are we?" She moved closer, close enough he could see gold flecks in her amethyst eyes. "I wanted to be strong enough that no one could hurt me again." Mission accomplished. "I wanted to find the boy who saved me." Also accomplished. "I wanted—" She reached up to touch his face. "I wanted to ask why you never came back." "I tried." The words came out in a rush. "God, Tyrus, I tried. But you were gone, and then you were the Ice Empress, and then Grandpa had missions, and—" She silenced him with a kiss, softer this time, like a question rather than an accusation. "I'm sorry," he whispered when they parted. "For what?" "For taking 20 years, for the pudding, for the collar. I'm definitely paying you back for that." She started to smile. The collar was actually kind of— Plasma fire erupted around them, shattering the moment. Kale stood at the garden's edge with a full squad of Syndicate soldiers, their weapons trained on the couple. "How touching," he called across the distance. "The Empress and her pet dying together among the flowers. Poetic, really." Matthew did a quick count. 12 soldiers, plus Kale. They had one sword and whatever he could improvise. "Ideas?" Tyrus muttered from the corner of her mouth. "Working on it," he replied. "Work faster." A memory sparked. "Remember when we were kids, playing in the docking bay?" "This seems like an odd time for nostalgia," she hissed. "You said your ship was faster than mine." She glanced at him sideways. "Still is. Prove it." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're insane." "Probably." A beat. Then, "I love it." They split, running in opposite directions just as Kale's soldiers opened fire. Plasma fire lit the night. Matthew dove left, hitting dirt as superheated energy carved trenches where he'd been standing. His shoulder scraped rough stone. Something wet, his blood, ran down his arm. 20 years of training took over. Roll, assess, acquire weapon. The ornamental sword Tyrus had dropped lay 3 feet away. He grabbed it as he came up, already moving toward the nearest threat. 3 Syndicate soldiers were tracking him with their rifles. Their first mistake was assuming he'd keep running. Matthew changed direction mid-stride and went straight at them. The first soldier hesitated. Nobody ran toward plasma rifles. Matthew slid low, sword extended. The blade caught the man behind his knee, hamstringing him. The soldier screamed and dropped. Matthew used the falling body as cover, rolling behind it as the second soldier fired. Plasma seared over his head, close enough to singe his hair. The third soldier tried to get a clear shot, stepped too far left. Matthew grabbed the wounded soldier's rifle and fired blind. The plasma caught soldier 3 in the chest. He went down hard. The second soldier swung his rifle like a club. Matthew ducked, came up inside the man's guard, and drove the sword up through his jaw. The soldier's eyes went wide, then empty. 3 down, Matthew muttered, pulling the blade free. "Behind the fountain!" Tyrus shouted from somewhere to his right. He threw himself sideways as plasma bolts shattered marble where he'd been standing. Chunks of stone peppered his back like hail. "You're bleeding!" Tyrus called out. He pressed himself against what remained of the fountain's base. "It's decorative bleeding, very fashionable. This isn't the time for jokes. It's always time for jokes when people are trying to kill us." More soldiers were advancing. Matthew counted muzzle flashes. 6, maybe 7. Plus, however many Tyrus was dealing with. Then Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "Take them alive if possible, dead if necessary." "Such inspiring leadership," Matthew called back. He shifted position, spotted Kale behind an overturned bench. "Hey, Kale, your mom must be so proud." Silence. "Oh, wait," Matthew continued. "She's dead." "My mother was a saint," Kale snarled, standing from cover. "Your mother ordered the assassination of children." Kale raised something massive, a military-grade plasma caster, the kind that could punch through tank armor. "Though I guess that runs in the family," Matthew added. The provocation worked. Kale stepped fully into the open, weapon rising. Matthew had been palming a knife from a fallen soldier for 30 seconds, waiting for this moment. The blade flew true. It took Kale in the shoulder, spinning him around. The plasma caster tumbled from his grip, firing wildly into the sky as it fell. "You dare!" Kale started. A plasma bolt caught him in the knee. He collapsed, screaming. Tyrus lowered her appropriated rifle. "He talks too much." "Nice shot," Matthew said. "I was aiming for his other knee." The remaining Syndicate soldiers stood frozen, suddenly leaderless. "Your employer's down," Matthew announced, standing slowly. "I'd reconsider your life choices right about now." 4 soldiers looked at each other, then ran for the garden exits. The others opened fire. Matthew grabbed Tyrus and pulled her down behind an overturned garden bed. Plasma rounds superheated the air above them, turning oxygen into ozone. "We can't stay here," she said, pressed against his shoulder. "No kidding." Matthew spotted Kale's plasma caster lying 10 feet away. "Can you reach that weapon?" "Maybe, if I don't mind losing an arm." "I have a better idea." "Does it involve you doing something stupidly heroic?" "Define stupid." "Matthew." He turned, cupped her face and kissed her, quick and hard. 20 years of want compressed into 3 seconds. "For luck," he said. Then he stood up. The world slowed. 5 soldiers spread in an arc, all focused on him now. Matthew ran straight at them, not zigzagging, not dodging. Grandpa's voice echoed in his memory. "Speed is armor, boy. Hesitation is death." The first soldier's rifle barrel glowed orange from continuous firing. Matthew grabbed it with his bare hand. The metal seared his palm. He smelled his own flesh cooking. He didn't let go. The soldier's eyes widened in shock. Nobody held on to superheated metal. Matthew headbutted him, nose crunching under his forehead. As the man staggered, Matthew took his sidearm and put 2 rounds into the soldiers on either side. 3 down, 2 left. 1 soldier fired. The shot went wide. His hands were shaking. Matthew shot him center mass. The man folded. The last soldier had pulled a vibroblade. Smart. At close range, rifles were useless. They circled each other. The soldier was good. Professional stance, balanced footwork. Matthew was better. The soldier lunged. Matthew turned into it, letting the blade score across his ribs. Fire traced along his side. He trapped the man's arm, twisted and broke it at the elbow. The blade fell. Matthew caught it before it hit the ground, reversed his grip and drove it between armor plates into the soldier's heart. The garden fell silent except for Kale's whimpering. "Clear," Matthew called out. Tyrus stood from cover slowly, staring at him. "That was stupid?" "I was going to say incredible." She ran to him as his knees buckled. "But stupid works too." The adrenaline was fading. His body started tallying the cost. Shoulder bleeding, palm cooked, ribs laid open. "Matt, I'm fine," he said, then proved himself wrong by nearly falling. She caught him, pressed her hands against his ribs. Blood seeped between her fingers. "You absolute idiot. Why didn't you wait for backup?" "What backup?" He gestured weakly at the burning palace. "Your guards are probably dead and—" He hissed as she pressed harder. "And you're terrible at first aid." "Shut up. Just shut up and don't die." "Not planning on it." He managed a weak smile. "We have a wedding to plan." "I didn't say yes." "You didn't say no either." From the ground, Kale laughed wetly. "You think this changes anything? The Syndicate has 100 ships. You have a burning palace." Matthew fumbled for the communicator in his outfit, the one thing he'd refused to leave behind. His bloody fingers found the activation button. "Admiral Stormbreaker to Hidden Fleet," he said clearly. "Authorization. Resurrection Protocol. The prodigal son lives." Static filled the air. Then, "Matt? You were supposed to maintain radio silence." "Hi, Grandpa. Change of plans." "Boy, what have you done?" Thomas's voice crackled through the communicator. "Started a war, I think." Matthew leaned harder on Tyrus. "How fast can you get here?" "The fleet's already in system, you insubordinate brat. We've been waiting 3 days." "You knew?" "I've known you for 30 years. You think I can't predict when you'll do something stupid for a girl?" Matthew looked at Tyrus. He knew. "Of course I knew," Thomas continued. "Empress Tyrus, I'm Admiral Thomas Stormbreaker. I believe you knew my grandson when he was shorter and stupider." "He's still stupid," Tyrus said toward the communicator. "Just taller now." "Ha! I like her. Matthew, stop bleeding and send coordinates. We're detecting multiple Syndicate signatures converging." "How many?" Matthew asked. 40 ships so far. More jumping in." Kale laughed from his spot on the ground. "You're outnumbered 4-1. Tyrus pulled out her own communicator. "Admiral Kren, this is your Empress. All ships, battle stations. We have incoming hostiles and," she glanced at Matthew, "unexpected allies." "Your Majesty," came the reply, "we're reading Terran signatures. They're with us. Coordinate with Admiral Stormbreaker." "The Stormbreaker? The Iron Fist?" "Always with the dramatic nicknames," Matthew muttered. A shadow passed overhead. Through the smoke, Matthew saw the distinctive wedge shape of a Terran battlecruiser. "That's the Indomitable," he breathed. "Your ship?" "Technically, if I wasn't supposed to be dead." Above them, more ships appeared. The night sky filled with engines, Terran and Valurian vessels taking defensive positions. In the distance, Syndicate ships dropped from hyperspace like a swarm of metal insects. "Can you stand?" Tyrus asked. "Do I have a choice?" She helped him up. They must have looked like hell. Him half naked and bleeding. Her in a torn dress covered in other people's blood. "Matt," she said quietly, "there's something you should know. The Syndicate isn't just after my throne." "What else?" "Navigation data. Pre-collapse routes to Earth." Matthew's blood chilled. "That's impossible. Earth is gone. My mother's family kept records, old records. And the Syndicate knows?" Kale told them. She glanced at her wounded cousin. Traded the information for their support. Above them, the first shots were fired. Plasma and kinetic rounds painted false dawn across the night. They supported each other through the burning palace. Every step hurt. Matthew left bloody footprints on marble floors. The command center was buried deep, hardened against bombardment. They found it intact but in chaos. "Empress!" General Heron snapped to attention. "Thank the ancestors. We thought—" "I'm hard to kill, General." Tyrus moved to the tactical display. "Status? 60 Syndicate ships and climbing. Our forces? 30 Valurian vessels. The Terrans have," he checked his screen, 12 ships, but they're devastating. Every shot a kill. "That's Grandpa," Matthew said, collapsing into a chair. "He doesn't do warning shots." On the display, the Indomitable carved through 2 Syndicate frigates simultaneously. "Matthew," Thomas's voice came through, "get to medical." "I'm fine. You're bleeding on the tactical display." Matthew looked down. Red droplets were indeed falling onto the hologram. "It's adding dramatic effect. Medical bay, now. That's an order. I'm technically dead. Can't order dead people." "Admiral," Tyrus interrupted, "with respect, shut up." She turned to Matthew. "Sit, before you fall." The room shook. Something big had hit the palace shields. "They're focusing fire on us," Heron reported. "Shields at 60%. Tyrus studied the tactical display. "They're clustering, trying to overwhelm us with numbers." "Exactly what we want," Matthew said, forcing himself to focus through the blood loss. "Grandpa, you seeing this? Sloppy formation, overconfident. Draw them in? Then hit the center, like Proxima? I was 12 at Proxima, and you nearly got us killed. But it worked." Tyrus understood immediately. "All ships, tactical withdrawal, pattern Beta 3, make it look real." The Allied fleets pulled back gradually. Ships took actual damage, shields flaring, armor scoring. The Syndicate pressed forward, smelling blood. "They're taking it," Heron reported. 40 ships converging. "Wait for it," Matthew whispered. The Syndicate ships clustered tighter, preparing for a killing blow. "Now!" Tyrus commanded. The Allied fleets fired as one. Concentrated fire carved through the Syndicate center. Ships died in seconds, shields overwhelmed, hulls cracking. Then Heron shouted, "Massive signature dropping from hyperspace." The ship that appeared dwarfed everything else, 1 kilometer long, bristling with weapons. "That's not Syndicate," Matthew said quietly. "That's Graki," Tyrus finished. "A dreadnought." The massive ship's weapons charged. "All ships scatter," Thomas commanded. Too late. The dreadnought fired. The palace shields died instantly. The upper levels vaporized. The command center shook violently. Ceiling panels crashed down. Matthew threw himself over Tyrus as debris rained around them. "The garden!" Tyrus shouted over the destruction. "Emergency shuttle!" They ran through collapsing corridors. Staff fled past them. Smoke filled every breath. The garden was on fire. Purple and gold flowers burned, filling the air with sweet smoke. Through the flames, a shuttle, somehow intact. They ran for it as the dreadnought fired again. The palace split. The ground tilted 45 degrees. Matthew grabbed Tyrus as they slid toward a 1,000-foot drop. His bloody hand caught exposed rebar. Their combined weight nearly tore his arm out. "Climb!" he shouted. She climbed over him, reached the shuttle, then turned back. "Go! Start it! Not without you. That's an order. I don't take orders from dead men." Despite everything, he laughed, then hauled himself up as the palace collapsed entirely. Tyrus was already in the pilot seat, hands flying over controls. "Please work! Please work!" The engines roared to life. They lifted off as the garden fell into void. Through the viewport, Matthew saw the dreadnought's weapons tracking them. "We're not going to make it," he said. "Yes, we are." Her hands were steady. "You made me a promise." "About the house with a pool?" "About finding me. You found me. I'm not losing you now." The dreadnought fired and exploded. The Indomitable rose through the fireball, every weapon blazing. Thomas had rammed his flagship through the dreadnought's belly. "Grandpa!" "I'm fine, you emotional infant. The Indomitable's built for ramming. Now get clear." The remaining Syndicate ships scattered. The battle was over. Matthew collapsed in the co-pilot seat. Everything hurt. "We won," he said. "We survived," Tyrus corrected. She set the autopilot, then turned to him fully. "You asked me to marry you," she said. "I did." During a battle. Seemed appropriate. While bleeding to death. Only mostly bleeding to death. "Matthew." "Yes?" "I love you." He blinked. "What?" I've loved you since I was 9 and you fought 3 Graki with a pipe. Her voice broke slightly. I loved you when you gave me everything. I loved you through 20 years of not knowing if you were real or a dream. Tyrus, I built an empire on the money you gave me. Every decision, every victory. I wondered what that boy would think. I'm so proud of you. Then why are you crying? He touched his face, wet. Because I thought I'd lost you before I could say it back. Say what? That I love you too. Have since you called my grandfather an idiot. She laughed, then winced. We need medical attention. We need a wedding planner. We need to not die first. Details. They kissed in the shuttle above their burning palace. It tasted like blood and smoke and 20 years of waiting. Your grandfather's going to be insufferable, she said. He's already insufferable. Now he'll be insufferably right about you doing something stupid for a girl. Not just a girl, an empress. Your empress. My empress, he agreed, who still owes me for that collar. You looked good in it. I looked ridiculous. Ridiculously good. They were still arguing when the medical teams found them, half dead and completely in love. The wooden sword cracked against Admiral Thomas Stormbreaker's practice blade with enough force to make the old man's teeth rattle. 5-year-old Tommy pressed his advantage, purple face scrunched in concentration, silver hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. Better, Thomas barked, parrying the next strike. But you're still dropping your guard. See? He tapped the boy's exposed shoulder with his blade. Dead. Grandpa, that's not fair. You're bigger. Your enemies will always be bigger, until they're not. Then they're dead. Tommy considered this logic with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. So, I should kill them when they're small? That's not exactly what Daddy! Grandpa's teaching Tommy to murder people again. The shout came from the palace balcony overlooking the rebuilt garden. Empress Tyrus Stormbreaker, 7 months pregnant and radiating the particular fury of someone who'd specifically forbidden murder lessons before breakfast, glared down at them. We're not murdering anyone, Thomas called back. We're discussing tactical advantages. He's 5. 5 3/4, Tommy corrected, then yelped as his grandfather's practice sword bonked him on the head. Never correct your mother when she's angry. First rule of survival. Matthew emerged from the palace doors carrying 3-year-old Luna on his shoulders. She had her mother's violet skin and her father's stubborn chin, currently covered in what appeared to be jam. Daddy, fly faster, Luna commanded, pulling his hair like reins. Any faster, and Daddy's going to need neck surgery, Matthew groaned, but he obliged with a few bouncing steps that made her squeal with delight. Mama said Grandpa's being Luna paused, clearly trying to remember the word, a bad influence. Your mama's right, Matthew said, setting his daughter down. She immediately ran to Thomas, who dropped his sword to catch her. Grandpa, look! She held up a flower crown, lopsided and falling apart but made with determination. I made it myself. Thomas's weathered face softened. It's beautiful, little star. It's for you. She stood on tiptoes trying to reach his head. The terror of 3 sectors, the iron fist of the Terran fleet, knelt so his granddaughter could crown him with purple and gold flowers. How do I look? He asked seriously. Pretty, Luna declared, then frowned. But you need more flowers. Tommy, give Grandpa your crown. No way, Mom made this one special. Then we'll make another, Tyrus said, waddling into the garden with the grace of someone who'd been trained to fight but was currently inhabited by what felt like an entire squadron. After someone explains why my son knows 17 ways to disembowel an opponent. 16, Tommy corrected. I forgot the one with the spoon. Thomas! Tyrus and Matthew shouted in unison. The boy asked, Thomas protested. He's naturally curious about anatomy. He's naturally curious about everything, Matthew said, scooping up his son. Yesterday he wanted to know if we could weaponize the vacuum cleaner. Can we? Tommy asked hopefully. No, his parents said together. Grandpa would, Tommy muttered. Grandpa weaponized a coffee maker once, Thomas said proudly. Took out 3 pirates with hot espresso and steam pressure. Thomas! What? It's a good story. Tyrus lowered herself carefully onto a garden bench, one hand on her belly. The baby's kicking. I think they're trying to escape before this family gets worse. Matthew sat beside her, pulling her close. Could be worse. Could be twins this time. Don't, she warned. The doctor said one this time. One calm, peaceful baby who won't try to dismantle the crib to build a catapult. That was Luna, Tommy said defensively. I only helped a little. You drew the blueprints, Matthew reminded him. She needed technical support. Luna had discovered a butterfly and was now chasing it with single-minded determination, flower petals scattering in her wake. Thomas watched her with the same expression he'd once reserved for successful military campaigns. She's got good tactical instincts, he mused. See how she's predicting the butterfly's movement pattern? She's 3, Tyrus said flatly. 3.5, Luna called out, not breaking stride in her pursuit. Almost 4. Where did they get this obsession with fractions? Matthew wondered. From the man who made you calculate missile trajectories at age 6, Tyrus said, glaring at Thomas. 8, Thomas corrected. 6 was basic arithmetic with flashcards. While hanging upside down. Well, yes, blood flow to the brain aids concentration. You're insane. I'm effective. Look how well Matthew turned out. They all looked at Matthew, who was currently making faces to make Tommy laugh, crossing his eyes and sticking out his tongue. Yes, Tyrus said dryly, a paragon of military dignity. Hey, I saved an empire, Matthew protested. You crashed a wedding reception, destroyed my palace, and proposed while bleeding out. But with dignity. You were wearing a collar. We agreed never to mention the collar. Mama, what's a collar? Luna asked, having given up on the butterfly. Something Daddy wore when he was being silly, Tyrus said with a wicked smile. I want to see. Pictures were burned, Matthew said quickly. In the palace, when it exploded. Very tragic. I have copies, Thomas announced. Grandpa. What? They're historical documents. My grandson, the great Admiral Stormbreaker, in a leather... Moving on, Matthew said loudly. Who wants to practice sword fighting? Me, both children shouted. After lunch, Tyrus said firmly. And real food this time, not just dessert with a vegetable garnish. Vegetables are important, Thomas said with a straight face. That's why I taught Matthew to weaponize carrots. You can't weaponize carrots, Tommy said skeptically. Frozen carrots, properly sharpened, can penetrate soft body armor at close range. Thomas Stormbreaker. It's theoretical, mostly theoretical. We only tested it once. When? Matthew asked, genuinely curious. Your 15th birthday. You don't remember because of the concussion. The concussion from the weaponized carrot? From dodging the weaponized carrot and hitting your head on the bulkhead. Tyrus stood up, using Matthew's shoulder for leverage. I'm going inside before I give birth early just from the stress of this conversation. I'll come with you, Matthew said, then called to the children. Tommy, Luna, help Grandpa clean up the practice weapons. But Daddy... Listen to your mother, he said, kissing Tyrus's forehead. She's growing your sibling, and that makes her the boss. Mama's always the boss, Luna said matter-of-factly. Smart girl, Tyrus said, ruffling her daughter's silver hair. As they walked toward the palace, Matthew could hear Thomas explaining to the children the proper way to maintain practice weapons. It involved surprisingly little murder talk and surprisingly much about responsibility and care. He's getting soft, Tyrus observed. He let Luna paint his fingernails last week. I saw. The purple really brought out his eyes. They paused at the entrance, looking back at the garden. Thomas was now lying on the grass, both children climbing on him like he was playground equipment. His flower crown had gone crooked, and his dignity was thoroughly compromised, but his laughter carried across the garden. "Think our kids will be okay?" Tyrus asked. "Growing up with all this?" Matthew touched the crystal at his wrist. He'd worn it on a military chain for 20 years, now set in a simple bracelet Tyrus had made for their wedding. The dragon tooth she'd kept all those years now hung around Luna's neck on a chain she couldn't break yet, waiting for when she was older. "They'll be better than okay," he said. "They've got warriors' training and flower crowns, strength and beauty, just like their mother." Flatterer. Truth-teller. "Daddy," Tommy called out. "Grandpa says we can use the practice drones after lunch." "The safe practice drones," Matthew called back. "Not the ones with lasers." "The fun ones have lasers," Thomas muttered, loud enough to carry. "I'm going to murder your grandfather," Tyrus said conversationally. "Get in line. I've been waiting 30 years. She laughed, then winced. "Oh, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Just the baby really wants out." "How badly?" "Well, my water just broke." "What?" "Surprise. Baby number 3 is as impatient as their father." "We need to get to the medical wing." "Matthew, breathe. We've done this twice." Right. "Grandpa, watch the kids. Baby's coming." Thomas's head snapped up. "Now?" "Now!" The old admiral went into command mode. "Tommy, Luna, battle stations! Your siblings arriving!" As Matthew half-carried, half-supported Tyrus to the medical wing, he could hear his father marshaling the children like tiny troops, keeping them distracted and organized. "You know," Tyrus panted between contractions, "for a family of warriors, we're pretty good at the whole love thing." "We had good teachers," Matthew said, thinking of 2 children on a dirty trading planet sharing everything they had. "Yeah," she agreed, squeezing his hand hard enough to crack bones. "We did." 6 hours later, as Matthew held his newest son, purple-skinned, silver-haired, and already gripping his finger with surprising strength, he thought about promises, about the boy who'd sworn to find the girl with flower crowns, about the girl who'd told him not to promise what he couldn't deliver. Outside the window, he could see the garden where Thomas was teaching Tommy and Luna to make flower chains, his military precision applied to the delicate art of weaving stems together. "What should we name him?" Tyrus asked, exhausted but radiant. "Something that won't get him beat up at military academy," Matthew suggested. "So not Flower Crown Stormbreaker?" "Probably not." "How about Marcus, after my father?" "Marcus Stormbreaker. I like it." "Good, because I already filled out the birth certificate." "When did you—" "While you were crying." "I wasn't crying. I was emotionally responding. You were sobbing like Tommy when we wouldn't let him keep the pet rock that turned out to be an unexploded grenade. That was a formative experience for him. It formed a crater in the garden." Baby Marcus opened his eyes, amethyst like his mother's, and immediately tried to eat his own fist. "He's perfect," Matthew said. "Yeah," Tyrus agreed, then grinned. "Think your grandfather will try to teach him to fight before he can walk?" "Absolutely." "And we'll let him?" "Absolutely not." They laughed quietly, not wanting to wake the baby who'd already fallen back asleep. Outside, the sun set over the rebuilt palace, painting the garden in shades of gold and purple. 3 children, 2 parents, and 1 semi-reformed grandfather. A family forged in fire, tempered in love, and held together by promises kept across decades and stars. Not bad for a boy who'd once puked in bog water and a girl who'd made flower crowns in the dark. Not bad at all.